What we're going to do now is we're going to move on and talk about Digital's activity with Windows NT. And judging by some of the questions before the break, this is the part that a lot of you have quite a bit of interest in. What we'll do is take a look, first of all, at the background of Digital's NT program. Take a look at the hardware that we're developing in support of Windows NT, particularly the Alpha PC. We'll take a look at the application migration approaches and some of the layered products that we're looking at to run under Windows NT. And then finally, some of the services, support, and training that will be part of our Windows NT program as well. The approach that Digital is taking with Windows NT is to really give customers a choice. We're getting away from the attitude that we're going to dictate the hardware platform or the operating system. For example, for CPU architectures, we're going to be offering 3 different platforms: our VAX architecture, Alpha AXP, and Intel. For operating systems, we'll have a choice of OpenVMS for those who are looking for the most maturity and robustness, Ultrix or OSF1 for those who want a Unix open system solution, and Windows NT for those desiring to get access to the wider range of PC-based applications. But it's just as important as the architectures and the operating systems is the fact that we want to be able to provide the tools that allow people to integrate the various diverse computing environments that our customers have. And I think it's that part, the tools and the services and the support, that's really going to distinguish Digital in the Windows NT marketplace. For those of you who are eager to go out and sell Windows NT or hardware that supports it, please be aware that there are already at least 10 systems which were listed on the Software Developers Kit compatibility list for October. And those systems include such things as older systems as the DECstation 425C, as well as the DEC PC 450 ST and the other ST systems, and also some of the Tiger II platforms. So there are DEC products which can run Windows NT today. Now, of course, what a lot of people are interested in is the Alpha AXP-based PC. This has generated a lot of interest, not just within Digital, but also within our customer base, and I know this from talking to a lot of them, as well as a lot of the computer press. In fact, if any of you get PC Week, you definitely want to check out a recent issue that had not just 2 front-page articles extolling the Alpha PC system, but also showed some pictures of what the system looks like. In addition, there have been recent articles in Computer Reseller magazine, as well as Digital News and Review, that talk about first looks at the Alpha AXP system. Anyway, the preliminary specification for this system looks like it'll be built around the 150 megahertz Alpha AXP processor. And in terms of just clock speed alone, this is twice the speed of the highest end 486 system. And in addition, it'll be able to support up to 256 megabytes of memory. As far as what the system's going to look like, it'll look very much like the DEC PC ST systems, Starburst or Short Tower systems that you see today. So it'll consist of a small tower about 1.5 feet high. The bus is going to be based on the ESA bus architecture, and there will be support for SCSI devices. So you'll be able to plug in standard SCSI hard disks, tape drives, CD readers, and so on. And it's going to be priced to compete with the high-end PCs. This is a preliminary specification only. Again, as it comes closer to the release date, which we expect to be towards the end of May, you'll get much more information about all of the details of the system, the configuration, the pricing, and so on. But it's systems such as these which have really gained the interest of our customers and the PC press so far. The next couple of slides that I'll be going over, I typically use when I'm presenting this to customers who may not, or even non-digital customers, who may not be familiar with Alpha AXP and what it means. I expect that most of you out there today have heard presentations on the Alpha system, so I'm not going to talk about all of these bullets specifically. I do want to touch on some topics. As you, I'm sure, know, the Alpha AXP uses a 64-bit RISC architecture. Now, some of you may say, Windows NT is a 32-bit operating system. Why would I want to run Windows, a 32-bit operating system on a 64-bit architecture? There are some places within Windows NT in the low levels of the operating system where we were actually able to take advantage of the 64 bits. In addition, there are other characteristics of the Alpha processor, such as the ability to issue multiple instructions simultaneously and the ability to modify that clock speed, which still makes it a very attractive environment. Alpha AXP, of course, is not just the chip itself, but it's also a lot of the peripheral hardware and support software as well. And in terms of the last bullet, Alpha AXP is able to run Windows NT, OSF1, and OpenVMS. That's very true. You need to keep in mind, though, that the first release of the Alpha PC is going to specifically run Windows NT. There's nothing firm yet to say that it's going to run OSF1 or OpenVMS. However, what the Windows NT Program Office says today is that over time, more Alpha systems will be able to run all three operating systems, or one of the three operating systems. And of course, this is exciting for customers because then they don't have to reinvest in new hardware to support the different operating systems that they may want to work with. Again, a lot of this should be review for most of you. The fact is that we want to make this architecture last into the next century, and we think it will, especially with its 64-bit data path. Speaking of which, Bill Gates was asked at a recent conference, when are you going to go to a 64-bit version of Windows NT now that people are coming out with 64-bit architectures? And he really said that there's nothing inherent within NT which would make that transition all that difficult. But with so many customers still facing the challenge of moving from 16 to 32 bits, it looks like it'll be a few more years before Microsoft takes that next step. But certainly we'll be ready when that becomes available. The point that we're licensing the architecture, the hardware, and the software means that in the future, people will be able to buy Alpha systems to run NT, not just from digital, but from other hardware vendors as well. And that the operating system itself, along with the Alpha hardware architecture, may be embedded in different types of non-standard PC systems. For example, some have suggested a high-definition television with NT and an Alpha chip might be a very nice and interesting combination. For customers, it means that they won't be restricted to just digital, but can buy the Alpha systems as well as the different components from other vendors as well. In terms of the architecture goals of Alpha AXP, we talked about the performance. How do we get higher performance? Well, certainly through the faster cycle times and through the ability to issue multiple instructions simultaneously. The longevity we're going to get from the Alpha AXP platform I don't think can be stressed enough. With 64 bits, it seems to appear, at least now, that that 64-bit architecture will last us for many years to come. A characteristic of Alpha, which I think will play an important part over the next months and years, is the fact that the Alpha architecture itself is scalable, and that we'll be able to come out with much faster and more powerful Alpha systems, but also smaller Alpha systems that require less power, generate less heat, and will be able to fit into smaller and smaller personal computing devices. And I think this is a very exciting possibility. And over the next couple of months, you'll be hearing more about low-cost Alpha PCs, which should get them into the hands of many more customers. We talked already a little bit about the fact that Alpha is not designed for any particular operating system and is compatible with such things as OSF1 and OpenVMS. So to just recap, the Alpha, there will be one PC initially, one Alpha PC, currently codenamed the Jensen. Over the next months and certainly the next year, we expect to have a much more complete family of Alpha products being able to run Windows NT. They're going to have that incredible Alpha performance, which on clock speed alone will far outstrip the 486 systems and should be quite a bit faster than the upcoming Intel Pentium systems as well. It's going to be built around the, initially around the ESA bus, which means, again, you'll be able to go out and buy standard PC peripherals. In the future, you'll also be hearing more about the PCI bus, which should give even greater throughput for things like disk I/O. Another feature is that the Alpha PC will support standard memory. So you won't just be tied again to buying, or your customer won't be tied to just buying memory from DEC. They can go out to the computing marketplace and take advantage of the lower cost out there. It's also going to include, again, the standard PC enclosures as well as high-performance graphics. That's important because graphics could be a bottleneck with a system as fast as the Alpha, and we're going to put in the highest graphic systems that we can find out there in order to support that speed. And then in terms of the pricing, we'll just call it competitive for now, and I'm sure some of you have heard rumors, and close to the release date, again, we'll get more specifics on exactly what the Alpha PC will be priced at. Let's take a second to look at some of the issues around the porting of Alpha Windows NT to Alpha. Let's look at some of the goals and whether or not those goals were achieved. I think this is useful for understanding how NT and Alpha relate, but also it gives you more insight into simply what the NT operating system, how it's designed and how it's built. The goal of the people out in Washington State who are doing the port of Windows NT to Alpha was to make it a complete implementation of Windows NT. There shouldn't be any Alpha unique system errors. In fact, they joke around that it should be bug for bug compatible with the Intel-based Windows NT. As I referred to in a question earlier, we don't want to have an Alpha-specific Windows NT with all of these digital added features, because then our customers are going to say, that's not really Windows NT, that's DEC Windows NT, or something like that. So we're going to work with Microsoft, certainly to make sure that enhancements are made, but as enhancements are made on Intel, they'll be ported to Alpha as well, and vice versa. There is one area of Windows NT where things are a little bit different on the Alpha platform versus on the Intel platform, and that's in the use of the OS2 subsystem. Right now, you cannot run OS2 applications on the Alpha platform, and I'm not sure whether that's ever going to be available. You can run them on the Intel platform using the OS2 subsystem. However, the OS2 support, even on the Intel platform, is very weak. There's only support for OS2 version 1.x, so 1.0, 1.1, etc. There's no support for OS2 version 2.0. There's also no support, even on Intel, for the Presentation Manager graphical user interface that comes with OS2. So no Presentation Manager applications currently run even on the Intel platform. So you can see that the OS2 support is fairly weak, and I'm not sure that's altogether unintentional. So if you do have customers looking for that OS2 support, they need to be aware that that will not be happening on the Alpha platform, or on the MIPS platform for that matter. If we take a look at the components of Windows NT that had to be ported for Alpha, they can include components such as the PAL code, HAL code, various changes within the kernel, device drivers, and so on. What I'd like to do is spend a little time on each of these because I think it helps you appreciate the work that had to go into it, but also points out how portable Windows NT really is, as well as points out some of the characteristics of the operating system. What I'm going to do is go back to the board for a second and just extend the diagram that I brought to you earlier. Okay. Previously, I talked about how you have the Windows NT operating system, and within that, there's a component called the HAL layer. And in the HAL layer is all the code which directly accesses the hardware. This is the part of the operating system where most of the porting activity takes place. Now, in the Alpha architecture, there's another layer, which is the privileged architecture library code. This is specific to Alpha. You don't see this on MIPS. You don't see it on Intel. The purpose of the PAL code is to allow Digital to make changes to the underlying Alpha architecture without having to go in and rewrite the operating system itself. What you would do is install the new hardware and install the new PAL code, which really is just, it's very similar to what was microcode on other operating systems and typically exists on a chip. So again, you would change the hardware, change the chip or chips that contain the PAL code, and then the rest of the operating system should continue to run as before. The second component, the one that is layered above that, is the hardware abstraction layer. Again, is this platform specific, so you have a different version of HAL code for the Intel platform, MIPS platform, and the Alpha platform. And you'll have one for the Integraph as well. Within the hardware abstraction layer, you have various operating system functions which deal with hardware, such as caching, doing the mapping of I/O adapters, handling interrupts, coordinating various system timers, and the coordination of multiprocessing, so the communication between various CPUs. Because these are handled within HAL, to port them from one platform to another is fairly straightforward. You simply make the changes in the HAL layer rather than in the rest of the operating system. So the operating system calls to do caching and I/O adapter mapping and so on don't have to be modified, just that underlying HAL layer. This is probably the operating system, part of the operating system where most of the effort went into in doing the port from Intel and MIPS over to Alpha. In the illustration that I showed you, there were certain areas where the operating system does not communicate with the HAL layer. And this is because there are certain times when either the operating system needs to know about the hardware or the hardware needs to know about specifics of the operating system. For example, exception handling. An exception is generated when you have a hardware error, such as trying to access a disk drive which has gone offline, or maybe you do an illegal software operation, such as dividing by zero. In either case, in order to handle an exception correctly, what you typically need to do is you need to step back within your program. You need to basically move backwards. And so you need information on hardware-specific things such as the program counter and the value of your hardware registers. If I went through the HAL code, all I'd be getting is a generic user interface into those things. I need to go around it so I can get the hardware-specific information. I mentioned earlier that while Windows 32, Windows NT, the 32-bit operating system, doesn't fully exploit Alpha's 64-bit architecture, there are some things down in the lower levels of the operating system which can take advantage of the 64-bit data paths. And that includes being able to move large chunks of memory from one location to another. And this can be a very valuable feature because there are many applications where you are, in fact, moving memory around in large chunks at once. Applications such as visualization of data or image analysis or image enhancement. Something which is typically very much of a challenge when porting from Windows, from one operating system, from one platform to another, is device drivers. Device drivers have traditionally been written in very low-level code such as assembler and have to be basically rewritten as you go from one platform to another. Well, Microsoft redesigned their device driver architecture and in fact wrote the majority of the device drivers in C code, again isolating as much of the machine-specific part in certain modules of the device driver code. So the digital engineers who were porting NT over to Alpha were, I think, pleasantly pleased to find out that most device drivers really only required a recompile and a relink, as well as certain tweaking for the Alpha hardware. Some of you may be asking, when you look at the hardware configuration that I gave you before, why are we supporting an ESA bus on the first Alpha PC rather than something, say, like the Turbo Channel or the Future bus? Well, certainly one of the reasons was with compatibility with existing PCs, but also I think the fact that it was a time issue. And we would have had to have written device drivers specifically for the Turbo Channel or the Future bus from scratch, whereas with the ESA bus, we were able to, again, do a very straightforward port from the existing Intel system. Another thing that we wanted to ensure both our users as well as third-party application developers was that the programming environment was going to be the same on Alpha as it is on Intel and MIPS. And so the goal is to provide a common C and C++ compiler and software development environment for both Intel, MIPS, and Alpha. And as well as the same software development environment, it also meant support for identical APIs. Now, the first release of the Alpha compiler was actually based on our OSF 1 compiler for OSF 1, but since then, Microsoft and Digital have been working together to move Microsoft's C7 C and C++ compiler over to Alpha. And now that is available to our third-party partners who are developing Windows NT applications. So again, the goal is you can write an application today on, say, Intel, and then be able to move it very straightforwardly with just a recompile and a relink over to Alpha. In addition, Windows 16 and DOS applications are also going to be supported on the Alpha platform. How the virtual DOS machine works on Intel versus Alpha is slightly different, because on Intel, they were actually able to integrate DOS 5.0 source code into the virtual DOS machine. With the Windows NT on Alpha system, we included an emulator code and integrated that into the virtual DOS machine. However, from the user standpoint, running DOS applications on Alpha should be just like I showed it to you on the Intel system during the demonstration. So let's look at the status of Windows NT on Alpha today. The Alpha PC was first booted back in July, and at that point it was only up to a command prompt, basically. The next big goal was porting over the graphical user interface, which I understand the engineers were sweating about a little at first because they'd never tried it, but in fact it was fairly straightforward, and within a matter of weeks after that first boot, they had most of the graphical user interface in place, as well as most of the small applications that come as standard products. We got the first Alpha PCs out to the porting centers back in the fall of 1992, and many of the Alpha migration centers are already actively working with our third-party developers to port their applications over to NT on Alpha. We've had the hardware shown at DCUS. Bill Gates did a widely publicized demo of Windows NT on Alpha on Wall Street, and we had a large demonstrations of both Alpha PC hardware as well as a lot of applications at the big Comdex PC show in Las Vegas back in November. Since then, the Alpha PCs are being seen far and wide at a lot of shows, and as I mentioned earlier, being reviewed by a lot of the PC magazines. Let's just go back to the application migration strategy for a second, because I think this is of a lot of interest to a lot of people. Right now you have two basic alternatives for running existing DOS or Windows 16-bit programs. You can either go through the emulation via the virtual DOS machine, or you can do a port to the native, a native Intel port or a native Alpha port. And let's look at those alternatives. Certainly, the x86 emulation through the virtual DOS machine is fine for existing DOS and Windows 16-bit applications. One of the things that happens with this emulation process is that all of the graphical user interface calls actually get converted into native Windows 32-bit calls. So very graphics-intensive applications are going to run at a really pretty good speed on, through the virtual DOS machine. Where you run into more problems is when you're going and calling into the operating system to do such things as computations of large numbers of arrays of number, for example, or a lot of file I/O, where you might, instead of using 32 bits, you're going to be using 16 bits. I would say that for most applications, using current DOS and Windows 16 programs is really a stopgap measure. And we want to try to persuade as many people as possible to move those applications over to a native 32-bit format. And the other thing that I perhaps should have said before is, as people are evaluating whether they want to use Windows NT as their desktop operating system versus DOS and Windows 16, if you're going to be running strictly existing DOS and Windows applications, you probably want to stick with a DOS and Windows 16-bit, Windows 3.1 environment. But if you're going to be running a combination of DOS and Windows 16 programs side by side with Windows NT programs, then you want to go to this type of environment here. Again, what we're trying to do as a company is move as many of our applications as makes sense over to Windows NT, as well as getting the third-party companies, including Microsoft, to port their applications over to both the Alpha platform and the Intel platform. In order to take advantage of the 32-bit features of Windows NT, you either want to use the Windows 32 API or the POSIX API. And again, the goal is a single source code and 3 build procedures, or 3 compiles and recompiles and relinks for Intel, MIPS, and Alpha. Again, to port existing Windows 16 code over to Windows 32 code is fairly well documented. Just to overgeneralize things, the 2 major tasks are to remove various memory management code where DOS uses a segmented memory scheme and NT uses virtual memory, and to change the 16-bit APIs and parameters to 32-bit APIs and parameters. Now, what's Digital's approach to applications? What we've done is we've taken and looked at what are the areas where Windows NT needs enhancements. In other words, what are the families of applications that are going to be most useful to our customers? And they include things that you see listed here: software development tools, network and PC integration tools, user interface and graphics tools, and so forth. And what Digital is doing right now is looking at our existing products and seeing which of them fit best into the Windows NT world. We want to look at not only what we have to offer, but what our competitors in the software environment have to offer. And if we don't add the extra value, if we aren't going to be competitive in that marketplace, we may not develop it ourselves, but may instead encourage our application partners to do it instead. With that said, there are some near-term products that Digital is looking at providing for Windows NT. When I say near-term, what I mean is they're either going to be available when Windows NT is released or very shortly thereafter, so within the next couple of weeks after that. Probably the key one is PathWorks for Windows NT. I certainly know from talking to my customers and delivering these courses to customers that the key thing people are concerned about is how am I going to tie that NT-PC into the rest of my computing environment. Excursion for Windows NT will allow us to run current X Windows-based application on our Unix or OpenVMS systems and display the output on our PCs running NT. So Excursion, if you're not familiar with it, is our X Windows server for the PC platform. It's currently being sold for Windows 3.1, and again, it's been demonstrated in a prototype fashion on Windows NT and will be available for not just the Alpha platform, but for Intel as well. Desktop ACMS is a combination of application and tools that allow people to create programs for the desktop that gain access into our ACMS transaction processing system that runs under OpenVMS. So this way, people can sit at their PCs, run NT, have their local applications, and also have a window into the transaction processing environment on that mini computer environment. In terms of languages and tools that we're looking at, certainly some of the languages that we're looking at are DEC C++ as well as DEC Fortran for Windows NT. I'm not sure of the status of that. We may not find it out today, but certainly we'll have more on that in the near future. And then finally, we have the NAS 300 integrated middleware services, which is a real mouthful, but in kind of to sum it up quickly, it's a set of tools that allows you to create client-server-based applications. The two major components of the NAS 300 services are ACAS, or the Application Control Architecture Services, and DEC Message Queue. Application Control Architecture Services is an object-oriented programming environment that allows you to basically start up applications on remote systems, get information passed back. It's independent of the hardware, so it allows you to do some nice integration between a multitude of hardware environments, enables you to transfer information transparently of, big endian versus little endian and so forth. DEC Message Queue is a slightly different approach to client-server where you're passing messages back and forth between applications. Anyway, each of those, both ACA services and DEC Message Queue, are currently used today in a lot of environments. They don't require an OpenVMS or an OSF1 or an Ultrix server, so they can actually be free of a lot of the digital hardware constraints that some other products have, and will be a very nice tool for people who want to do client-server development under Windows NT. PathWorks is, as I said before, probably one of the key products that we've got to come out with for Windows NT in the near future. And the whole, I'm sure most of you know what PathWorks does and what it provides. Basically allows you to set up local area network and wide area network connectivity between a variety of platforms, including PCs, mini computers, workstations, and so forth. And you're basically allowed to integrate and unify a variety of applications and environments. It's much more than just a protocol or a terminal emulator. It's a whole environment for doing system integration. Although certainly some of the key components of PathWorks are file, print, mail, and application services. The goals of, let's call them the near-term goals of PathWorks, is to be able to create both a PathWorks client and server for Windows NT. So in other words, if you set up a Windows NT system as a PathWorks client, that user at that PC will be able to interact and gain information from VMS, Ultrix, SCO, OS2 systems that are running PathWorks servers. You'll be able to use DECnet as a transport, but it's also going to work with TCP/IP or NetBEUI. In addition, you can set your Windows NT system up as a PathWorks server. And in this type of environment, you can have access to PathWorks, access from PathWorks systems which are running DOS, Windows, and OS2, and again, using DECnet as the transport. The goal of the product is also to provide as many applications as possible, for example, terminal emulators and remote file access, as well as a whole wide range of management utilities that people are currently using for for PathWorks. The goal is to provide as much of this at the first release as possible. Certainly we'll have the client and the server and the DECnet transport. And then as fast as the engineers can work, we'll also provide the other capabilities that people have come to expect from PathWorks. This is just a slide showing how an NT client and a server could exist in, coexist within a PathWorks environment today. Besides PathWorks, some of the things that we're looking at in terms of support for Windows NT include a variety of services. For example, we have we're currently in the process of defining service strategies, and you could kind of separate this into two different families. One would be system management and end user services. The other one would be application developer services. And while this hasn't been fully defined yet, certainly people are going to need help installing and starting up Windows NT. I'll have to admit it's not nearly as difficult as installing a VMS or even a Unix system. It's much more like installing Windows. But there are still some challenges, especially getting the CD interface hooked up and so on. We're going to be able to provide system upgrades, not just for our own systems, but for others. We're working with Microsoft on providing hotline, online support so customers who need help immediately can get it. One of the things that Microsoft hasn't had a lot of experience with so far is in supporting large companies and providing a lot of service, especially immediate service, things that digital does very well. So we're working on with Microsoft right now on exactly how the different support issues are going to be worked. We have groups that are working on putting together packages to help with performance tuning of Windows NT, as well as guidance with the configuration of NT. Certainly training is another service that we want to provide, and we'll be going through some of that in a little while. And then we see some specific types of custom projects and consulting that our customers are already asking for. For developers, we're going to be providing, and in fact already are providing, application porting help. The alpha migration centers are already doing this within the US. We expect that to be, those services to become available worldwide. And also local digital offices will be geared up to provide help with this type of work. And besides doing actual porting, various remedial support and training will also be available. Some of the things, just to go back to PathWorks for a second, I wanted to cover a few things that I didn't discuss in that last slide. Some of the other things about PathWorks, especially when you're trying to position it against maybe the advanced server for Windows NT. One of the things that we'll be allowing is for people to have a much easier porting process of network-based Unix applications to Windows NT. A lot of network-based applications are written today using the PathWorks socket API. That PathWorks socket API will be available under Windows NT as well. So it'll provide a very smooth transition path for those people who are moving applications from Unix to NT. In addition, there are going to be a variety of Ultrix and DOS applications and tools that will become available. For example, people that need to gain access to applications on VMS and Ultrix will be able to do that through NT. Certainly one of the key applications is going to be the terminal emulators, which will allow the NT desktop to gain access to all the terminal character cell-based applications running today. And for the short term, those PathWorks programs which currently work under DOS will still be available to the NT system, even though they haven't been ported over. And the reason for that is, again, through the virtual DOS machine. So the PathWorks apps today will run under the virtual DOS machine under NT. Some other things which make PathWorks a little bit perhaps more feature-rich than some of the other networking environments include the FDDI support, as well as the need by some customers to do such things as synchronous or asynchronous transport, especially for things like remote offices. And then the other thing is that remote management will be available using SNMP protocols. Getting back to the services strategy, I put together a series of slides which I'll quickly go through now, but I know that you have it in front of you as well, that lists some of the digital skills that exist today and how they might translate over into the Windows NT environment. And this can be used as you plan how to use the resources that you currently have, and might provide you with ways that you can use your existing skills to help digital be successful with Windows NT. Okay, so that's a quick look at some of those, the services strategy. And again, I'll allow you to go over that at your own pace a little later on. For people who want to go and get the Software Developers Kit, there's a number you can call for help from Microsoft, or to get the Software Developers Kit from Microsoft. For people in Canada, you have your own number. And for people outside of the US or Canada, you should contact your local Microsoft office, and they'll help you get that software. The price within the US for the CD-ROM only, which includes both the operating system, the Software Developers Kit, as well as online documentation in PostScript format, is $69, which is an excellent price, especially when you consider that when the final version of Windows NT comes out, you will get a copy of that, a fully licensed copy of both the operating system and the Software Developers Kit. If you absolutely have to have the documentation, you can pay a little bit more money for that, and you'll get that. Now, I don't know about the next version of the operating system, but I know that for the October version, the documentation consisted solely of the documentation of the APIs and how to do programming. There was no system management documentation there, no user documentation. So be careful when you're ordering this. Don't expect that, at least until we find out what becomes available in this next release. Some additional assistance that you can get. Right now, the support is not really in place from Microsoft for people to just call up and ask questions. The chief support mechanism at this time is CompuServe. CompuServe is an electronic bulletin board system. They have forums which are very similar to our notes conferences. And there's one of them called WinNT, which is specifically for Windows NT help. So if you had questions on, is such and such a hardware platform supported, or I've installed Windows NT and the system crashes as it's booting up, that would be the forum to go to for help. For using the programming API, there's a Win32 forum for that. For those people who are interested in getting future training, there are a variety of courses which are either in development or will be in development very soon. One that's not listed here, but we'll give you a course number in a little while, includes a technical planning course. This course is again, a one-day seminar that gets into more detail, more technical detail than we'll have a chance to do today and during the next session. Beyond that technical planning course, there are really two paths, one for the system managers, another one for the application developers. There's going to be a Windows NT installation and system management course, which is going to mainly focus on standalone systems. How do you install them? How do you set them up? Probably with some basic networking built into that. This is well along into development and should be available quite soon. A more advanced course than that is Windows NT Services and Network Configuration, which is much more oriented to the network environment. So this would go into how do you link your Windows NT system up into much larger networks, either LAN Manager, possibly Novell, and certainly PathWorks. This is going to be, this is in development. It's not available yet, but it should be in a couple of months. For application programmers, there's a Windows NT application development course, which is going to focus on creating Windows NT applications. Now, the Windows 32-bit API, which is going to be covered in this course, consists of more than 400 actual APIs. Certainly, we won't be able to cover all of them in a one-week course, but this will go into the basics of creating a Windows 32 application, doing basic file I/O, memory management, using the software development environment, and so on. It's expected to be 5 days. It's well along in development and should be available fairly soon. And then we also see a need in the future for some advanced development topics for using things like the C++ class libraries, for doing remote procedure calls, for writing device drivers. And as time and the need arises, those courses will be developed either here at Digital or at Microsoft. Let me quickly go through some of the course numbers that are available here. You have the Windows NT Technical Planning. If you want to grab a pen and write these numbers down, the course number is EY-L558E. Again, that's EY-L558E. For the Windows NT Application Development course, that number is EY-L557E. And for the Installation and System Management course, the course number is EY-L555E. And all of these can be accessed for more information on the course and how to sign up for them by going into VTX Space Learning. There's another course which is, again, under development. This is the MS Windows NT Services and Network Configuration course. The course number here is EY-L556E. Again, that's EY-L556E. Also, if you're interested in getting a copy of today's materials over the network, what you can do is you can access the node Pinion. That's PINION : meta $public, META $public, left bracket, NT_Windows, close bracket. And there are two courses there that you'll find in that directory. One is NT_awareness_MGMT.ps and NT_awareness_tech.ps. Okay, soon we'll be bringing our guests on board. Meanwhile, let's take a look at why Windows NT is on Alpha is so exciting.
By putting NT onto DEC's Alpha hardware, we really bring together the best of both worlds.
The market advantage for us to get onto Windows NT and Alpha, make it all work together, is that we can bring to customers better solutions.
That NT will be the basis upon which we'll find very powerful workstations like Alpha.
I think there's no question that the combination of Oracle 7, Alpha, and Windows NT is going to be successful in the marketplace.
For many years, people have talked about the possibility of putting a Cray on a chip.
It's not only the rules that have changed, but the game itself. Ask a simple question these days like how fast, how high, or how much, and you'll get a simple answer.
How fast?
Change. But how far will simple answers take you in today's world?
Change.
And even more important, where will they get you in the future? Freedom, power, creativity, balance, opportunities without limits, without barriers. Opportunities that challenge the imagination. Ideas that redefine where we are and where we're going. And a technology that will take computing from here to there. Alpha AXP. Imagine the opportunities.
Well, customers today are facing the challenge and the opportunity of moving to client-server networks. And they want to be sure that the development tools and the architectures they build around are going to last for a long time. So they really want all the benefits of the workstation or the large computer together with the benefits of personal computing. And I think the best example of how customers can have that is this partnership between Digital and Microsoft on Alpha NT.
We see the Alpha as a Cray on a chip.
DEC is the only computer company that can pull this off.
Revolutionize the computer industry.
Redefine
Performance.
64 birds.
no bottleneck.
Performance.
What happened?
You put it to work.
NT. We see the Alpha as a Cray on a chip.
The fact is, we can design better cars, better airplanes.
And the combination of Alpha and Windows NT brought together, we have a real dynamite cocktail.
It's a quantum leap into a new place where application developers let their minds run free.
Why can't we?
Alpha and Windows NT.
Unlimited growth.
Right?
Perform endless capacity.
It's 21st century stuff.
What we accomplish in the future begins with what we imagine today. Alpha AXP computing is the power, the freedom to link our imagination with the future. A connection we can make today into 21st century computing.
It's really impressive to see how Alpha's moved out in front. Alpha's moved out in front.
The future is built in. Imagine the opportunities. Alpha AXP. 21st century computing.
Now I'd like to introduce our two guests. Bill Story is a manager of product management for Windows NT effort within Digital. As a manager of the program office, Bill works closely with Microsoft. Our other guest is Tom Ide. Tom is the product marketing manager for the PathWorks for Windows NT and Unix products. Bill and Tom are with us today to answer any questions you may have. While we're waiting for some calls to come in, I have some questions that I've been eager to ask both Bill and Tom. Bill, can you tell us a little bit about the Alpha Seed Unit program? And is there a developers program associated with it?
Certainly, Peter. Coming up in mid-March, Digital will be announcing a Seed Unit program for the Alpha PC running Windows NT. Again, it will be priced out at $69.95, Windows NT with the Jensen Alpha PC. And that will be available to application providers, both ISVs as well as application providers inside of the large end user type of accounts. Again, you'll be hearing more about that through a sales flash that will be coming out in about the mid-March timeframe. Initially, those systems will be available in the United States in late March, and then later in April will become available both in Europe and in GIA.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill. We have a question from New York. Hello.
I have a question that I addressed to Peter Wise earlier, but perhaps Bill's story might be more appropriate. The question I have is, what do you see as the logical outgrowth of the new alliance between Microsoft and Digital vis-a-vis VMS versus NT? And as NT adopts more and more of the functionality of VMS, such as multiprocessing, large clustered environments, and so on, where do you see this taking our VMS sales, and are we positioned right now to strategize for that?
Okay, it was a wide-ranging question there. Let me take that in two parts. The first is the relationship between digital and Microsoft. Again, this is a strategic relationship for both companies. For Microsoft, the Alpha platform represents the highest performance platform upon which Windows NT will run. Although it will be available initially on Intel, MIPS, and Alpha, and the Alpha platform will differentiate itself as being the highest performance platform upon which Windows NT will run. In the same way, Windows NT, the operating system offering from Microsoft, is strategically important to digital. Windows NT on Alpha AXP represents market expansion for digital as well as wider acceptance of our Alpha chip. You also raised the relative positioning of VMS as an operating system versus Windows NT. I think it's important to realize the position that digital is in today, where we are really moving from the one chicken, one egg, one basket strategy that served us so well in the 1980s into much more of a portfolio offering here in the 1990s. Digital today has three strategic operating systems: VMS, DEC OS F1, and Windows NT, all of which run on the Alpha platform and all of which are strategically important to digital.
Okay, the follow-on then.
Follow-up question?
Are new pricing strategies in the offing for VMS to make it more competitive?
I guess that's one we'd have to direct to my peers on the VMS side. I guess the general comment that I would make is that one of the impacts that I believe that Windows NT will have on the entire industry, that as Microsoft introduces Windows NT as the initial offering for less than $500 list price, will have a general impact throughout the industry for operating system offerings. I think we'll see it competitively first on the Unix side, but I think ultimately, as you're alluding to, will also have an impact on VMS.
Okay, final question. Do you see VMS going to other platforms besides Alpha AXP?
Again, I'm the Windows NT, in the Windows NT program office. That's one that we'll have to direct to Ken Swanton and the other good folks in VMS.
Fair enough. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, New York. We have a question from Los Angeles.
Hello, this is Steve Udick. I'm with the Los Angeles Government District, and we have a meeting with the Navy next week. The one thing I didn't hear presented in this session was their enterprise messaging server, enterprise mail server. Do we have a marketing direction we're taking with regards to that server?
So the question really is in regards to both the capability of mail and in particular the enterprise messaging as will be supplied by Microsoft.
That's correct.
A couple of facts just along the way. In the next beta refresh in beta 2 that's expected in March 1993 of Windows NT, the Microsoft Mail product will be included, packaged as part of that Windows NT beta 2 release. In the final general availability product, the Microsoft Mail product will be included with Windows NT. In general, Digital and Microsoft are working to align NAS and WOSA, the Windows Open Software Architecture. Part of that is Digital building MAPI, Messaging API, MAPI-based products on the Windows and Windows NT side. I think long term, you'll be seeing some additional products coming out from Digital that will both be built on top of the MAPI interface for Windows NT, as well as be able to interoperate with the enterprise messaging system that Microsoft is espousing at the moment.
Okay.
There's basically more to follow in this area.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have to move on. By the way, if you're trying to reach us and you are unable to, please keep trying. I guess our phone lines are tied up with questions. Also, if you could try to confine it to a question and perhaps a follow-up question, that'll give others also some time. Right now we have a question from Burlington, Massachusetts.
My question relates to the mention that was made about alpha PCs, about it our being intent to have alpha PCs available from several sources. Is it correct that it is our intention that PC houses like Compaq and Dell may end up selling alpha PCs? And if that's the case, are we pursuing such alliances?
Again, the question is, what is the digital position in regards to Windows NT running on alpha-based platforms from vendors other than digital? The general statement that I would make is that digital as a corporation really views alpha as representing a marketplace that's wider than digital equipment, that we really view the alpha chip, the alpha AXP chip, as being a universal platform, and as such, we not only run those 3 operating systems, but also would be available from a number of vendors. Again, at the current time, we're working a number of relationships with such vendors as Kubota, as well as Olivetti, both of whom intend to provide alpha-based platforms that would be suitable for running Windows NT. There's a number of other smaller workstation class companies that Digital has been working with, both here in the United States as well as in other countries as well. So in general, though we're not in a position to make any comment today in terms of Compaq or some of the other system vendors that you've mentioned in your phone call, in short, we do expect a number of other vendors to be providing alpha PC, alpha-based systems upon which Windows NT for alpha would be able to run.
Okay, we have a question from Tempe, Arizona.
Hello, this is Len Windmill in Tempe, Arizona, and the question I had revolved around the idea of, it was mentioned earlier something about that to have the big servers, alpha servers running Windows NT, there'd be a GUI built for those boxes. And I was under the impression that Windows NT would support some kind of remote graphical user interface, sort of along the lines of X Windows. Is that correct, or does NT not support remote networked graphical user interfaces?
Again, at the current time, in the Product 1 release, in the first release of Windows NT, the graphical user interface is not able to be networked remoted, although there's nothing architecturally that would prevent the GDI from being networked remoted. In this initial Product 1 release, that capability will not be there. So again, just to clear up your observation, unlike X Windows type of capability that can be remoted to an X11 display server, that type of capability will not be in the initial release of Windows NT.
We have a call from Orlando. Hello.
Hello. The mention of the technical planning course, the one-day course, available in the near future, it would be very interesting, I think, to a lot of the folks in the field if that type of course was delivered in a DVN format similar to the course that we're getting today, because it's very difficult from the field to travel somewhere and spend 2 days of travel for a one-day course. Is this a possibility?
It sure is. I think that's an excellent suggestion. I think after this, we'll certainly consider that, and I see your point. Another thing that might be interesting for us who are working on developing the course is if you want to suggest any type of course content you think may be useful in a one-day session, we'd certainly like to get your input.
Okay. And a second question was, is Microsoft the only avenue to be able to get these software developers kits? Since we're in a relationship with Microsoft, do they make these kits available in some quantity, like 1,000 or more, to us internally at Digital? And so would there be a possibility to get those kits on an internal basis without having to go external to be able to buy them?
The question is, what about getting access to those, the software development kits, the pre-release beta kits for Windows NT? In the pre-release beta timeframe, the position that Microsoft has taken that they'll be the mechanism by which those systems will be distributed. In the case of Alpha, the Alpha PC systems, as we go to pre-release, which basically what the seed unit program in March will be, again, we'll be distributing the CD-ROMs with the Alpha bits on it, the bits for NT on Alpha, packaged with the Jensen system boxes. So we'll be distributing it for Alpha. But in short, Microsoft will continue to be the mechanism by which the Windows NT CD-ROM for both the current Beta 2 as well, the current Beta 1 as well as the Beta 2 that's expected in March, that Microsoft will be the mechanism that they'll be distributed. Once we get into general availability of Windows NT, then Digital will be distributing Windows NT both for Intel platforms and for Alpha platforms, both packaged with our DEC PCs and Alpha-based products, as well as making the kit available as a line item upgrade for our existing base. But again, in short, in the beta time frame, Microsoft is the mechanism by which it will be distributed.
Okay, we have a call from Novi.
Hello, this is Mike Sharp in Novi. And in the past, there have been some PathWorks applications which were tied to a specific transport, network transport, and would only work, say, with DECnet. Will those applications be rewritten such that there's a disconnect between a specific transport and they'll be allowed to use any network transport supported by PathWorks, either on NT or any other application platform?
Yeah, I'll give that one a shot. Part of that is tied to the different application groups within Digital, and I can't really speak so much for those different application groups. I think they would, they evaluate the marketplace and realize that there's an importance to move beyond just the DECnet transport to support the OSI transport or to support TCP/IP or also to support TCP or NetBEUI. What we're doing within the Windows NT space, and Peter touched upon it, was to provide the PathWorks socket DLL library. Also, to enable the applications, essentially, think of it as being like the WinSock API that's included with the Windows NT environment to start providing that application portability to move applications into the different environments, to take advantage of some of those different transports. So we're providing some of the tools there. We're also providing a software developers kit, an SDK, that will be available at approximately the main time frame when we're in our second external field test. What that will be providing is essentially a lot of C file headers or C file libraries and headers that will improve the ability to do some additional application moving from other operating systems into the Windows NT environment. That will also be fully integrated with the Windows NT help system. So what we're trying to do is provide a variety of different paths for the different application groups within Digital to start moving into the Windows NT space.
I understand that you're providing the tools. It would, being in the field, that's what we have to have if we're going to survive in the marketplace. And this is input from the field. You can pass along to them. They need to do it, and anything that we can do to help them recognize that we want to do. Thank you for your answer.
Sure. Also, there are an awful lot of people back in corporate watching this telecast, so they heard you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Bye.
We have a call from Littleton, Massachusetts.
Hello.
Hello, Littleton.
Hi, yes, this is Craig Scott from Littleton. I have a question for Peter, a couple of them if I may. The first one is with the Alpha platform. You said it'll run VMS, OSF, NT. I'm wondering if those things can be, all of them can be installed or a couple of them installed together, and you can select at boot time which one you want to bring up?
Okay, as far as I know, in the first release, any of the Alpha systems that have been announced so far give you the choice of OSF1 or VMS, installing them on those. For the Alpha PC, at least in the initial release, it appears that only Windows NT will run on that. So you will not have that choice. In the future, I'm not so sure. Maybe Bill can provide a little more insight there.
Well, it's certainly true that the initial release of the Alpha PC will be running Windows NT as part of the firmware, the boot process for the Alpha PC. Though it defaults to a ARC-compliant boot mechanism, there is also the escape to boot VMS or OSF1. So that capability is there not only in terms of the intrinsic machine, it's an alpha, it could run VMS, it could run OSF1, but also in terms of the boot process itself. So that, again, there's, as you say, it would be at least potentially a possibility to on the same system, on the same Jensen system, to have NT and VMS, say, be able to boot either. Now, of course, NT supports either FAT format or NTFS format, whereas VMS supports files 11, so you're talking about different mechanisms, different file systems on the individual files. But again, the system itself is capable of booting either type of system.
Okay. Now the next question is: let's say you could do that. Let's say you had NT and VMS there. Could VMS come up with Motif?
Well, again, the real question you're asking is, if we digital supported VMS on an Alpha PC, would we support the graphics capability that's intrinsic to NT? Although that's, again, a possibility, my own understanding that you should validate with either the Jensen product manager, who's Nicole Benacasa, or with the VMS people, is that the initial focus for the VMS port to the Alpha PC is focusing much more on the server opportunity.
Okay, one fast question, if I may, and that is, supposing you have an Alpha machine and you run an emulated DOS or Windows 16 application program on it, Alpha being a very, very fast processor, supposing the application is too fast. I mean, if it was some sort of a user interaction and you need to slow it down, maybe it's some sort of a graphics thing, you need to slow it down. Is that possible?
Well, again, I'm not quite sure what you're asking. We don't have too many customers complaining that the systems run too fast, although as you point out with Alpha, I guess that's always a possibility. In terms of, again, DOS applications that would be running on Alpha, as Peter mentioned earlier, would be running under the virtual DOS machine of Windows NT. And on Alpha, we expect that they'll be running at 486 speeds, about 486, 33 megahertz, 486, 50 megahertz effective speeds. To get the full performance of Alpha, one needs to write their applications to the Windows 32 API and then recompile on Alpha for Alpha.
Okay, but just, I mean, silly little example. Let's say a guy wants to run a game, let's say Pac-Man or something, and he's got the Windows 3.1 version of it. He runs it, and it's like going too fast for him.
Again, it'll be running at the same speed as the 46, 50 megahertz on my desk, and I don't run Pac-Man, but Golf runs just fine on that. I'm sure it'll run fine on Alpha as well. I think at this point we've got to wrap it up a little bit as we move forward. Thank you very much for your question. Enjoy Pac-Man.
Okay, and we have one final question from Austin, Texas.
Hi, this is for Bill. It's kind of a follow-up on your last conversation having to do with applications. Are we working with any of the third-party applications vendors to get native mode applications, things like Lotus and Excel and AutoCAD, things like that?
Right. Again, the question is, well, how are we progressing on applications for Windows NT on Alpha? Again, back in November at Comdex, we demonstrated some 20 applications, the initial ports to Windows NT for Alpha. And again, there's press releases that have gone out on that. You may want to take a look at the Windows NT notes files for a copy of those press releases and other subsequent press releases from application vendors. At the current time, we're in field test, what Digital refers to as field test, with the Windows NT for Alpha products. We have in excess of 50 major ISVs who are currently in field test. So again, we're working with a number of applications there. Also, the key focus of that seed unit program that we talked about at the beginning was targeted towards the ISV community. The good news for Windows NT for Alpha is that once you have an application running on NT, and a lot of folks are building their applications for NT, once you have that application in the Windows 32 interface, it's just a recompile to get to Alpha. So again, part of the seed unit program is to get those Jensen units in the hands of the key folks who have already ported to NT to get them on Alpha. In this particular forum, it's hard to address individual application vendors who have not publicly announced. If you do have a particular vendor, give me a shout. I'm on LGO Hub. I'll be happy to respond to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bill. Well, thank you very much for your calls. Again, for those of you who need to get the materials from today, those are available online to you. To summarize, Digital is going to offer you a choice of operating systems, a choice of hardware platforms. We expect the Alpha PC to be the leader in terms of performance and price. And Digital is going to be offering a lot of software and a lot of services to help our customers get involved with Windows NT and to start incorporating it into their environments. Tomorrow we'll be presenting a technical overview of Windows NT, including such topics as looking at various operating system models and comparing those to NT, taking a look at the NT system architecture, looking at various protected subsystems under NT. We'll explore the Windows NT Executive, as well as some other related software such as the Windows Open System Architecture, internationalization, and Unicode. Also, of course, we'll have questions and answers available as well. Goodbye for now, and thank you very much for joining us.